Hello class, today I'm going to talk about rhetoric, the art of persuasion, as it pertains to the rhetorical situation and your first assignment, the visual analysis. But in order to understand how to analyze an image, you will need to understand the persuasive appeals as well as the rhetorical situation. So a brief introduction into the rhetorical situation. This is a quote that explains the understanding of what rhetoric looks like. Oftentimes when we think of rhetoric, we think negative connotative meanings such as politics, but it's just the art of language and how language influences who we are and how we can get what we want with the use of the proper language and context and content. Now, this video here, What is Rhetoric, comes from Purdue OWL, and it explores the persuasive appeals and how they came about. So take a moment to watch the video before continuing on with this lecture. We will begin with logos. Logos, when we think of logos, we oftentimes think of logic, but how is logic created? It isn't just a word, but it's the connection of the words, how it helps us to understand a concept. But again, logos is reasoning, and this can be both induction and deduction, and we'll talk more about that as well. But logos is the way that we connect to the reader through reasons, examples, and facts. But how is logos created? Well, one is credibility. Oftentimes we will not think credibility simply because we connect credibility with ethos. But when you're talking about logic and to change a person's mind, you want to reason with them. And the way you do that is by providing expert opinions that help to support your rationale. Without those expert opinions, they're less likely to believe you. So the more reliable your sources are, followed with solid evidence, helps to create that reasoning. And this is all a part of logos, more specifically what we would call inductive reasoning. Also, counter-arguments is a part of logic, because looking at the opposition, understanding what the opposition is saying and why they're saying it also helps to influence your audience to see, again, your rationale. So if you're able to pull in the opposition and what the opposition is saying and why they're saying it, you build more support of your rationale, your reasoning, your logos. Now, pathos is more common. We know what pathos is. We think of, sadness, and it also comes from the Greek word suffering. But pathos is actually just any type of emotion that you can create by using, strong images, using anecdotes, visual images, sensory details, all helps to create pathos. But any type of emotion you can provoke in your reader is pathos. Oftentimes people think pathos is one of the most dangerous of the persuasive appeals, because if you can provoke someone's emotions, you can get them to do something. But again, logic, we are rational creatures. We will always go back to logos. How pathos is created through concrete details, anecdotes, as I previously mentioned, and again, stories that have enough sensory images that helps to provoke the audience. The more figurative language, the more sensory details that you can creates an image in the reader's mind. Oftentimes, if you think about some of the commercials, specifically the ASPCA commercials, when they show the battered dogs and cats, and they tend to show them close up, they tend to show them with these sad faces, all because they want you to feel sorry for those animals so that you will send money. Again, they rely heavily on pathos because they want you to feel so bad that you almost feel guilty and therefore send them money. Pathos is an immediate response to an issue, but again, we always go back to logic. Now, ethos is character. When we say character, it's not just the credibility, but it's also the morals of a person. So when we think of ethos, I want you to think both the character but also morals. And it works two ways. When you consider ethos, you have to consider the character, the person, where they're coming from, who they are, how do you relate to them, but also your morals and how they appeal, meaning to influence your morals. Ethos is one of the most dangerous of the persuasive appeals, because people can pretend to care or pretend to understand what you're going through just to get what they want from you. And again, this is where oftentimes we consider politics. But ethos is also how they influence your morals. When a person mentions that they're a law-abiding citizen, they are hoping that you see their character, but also they may want to influence you by saying that that they're good Christians and all of that, because if you are also a good Christian, you will believe what they have to say to you. But again, ethos is not just the character, but also the morals and how the writer tries to appeal to your sense of duty, your sense of obligation is all ethos. Ethos is created so many ways because, again, we're dealing with two forms of it. If you stand by a position, then you're more likely to stand by someone who shares that same position. Same thing with how you look, how you act, how you walk, how you talk. All those things influence how we respond to a specific person and a specific issue. Now, I want you to take a moment to watch this video it's the closing arguments from A Time to Kill. And in this video, I want you to identify how the speaker uses the three persuasive appeals, but also consider the rhetorical situation. Now, keep in mind the rhetorical situation, which is composed of the writer or speaker, the audience, the opportunity, the message, and the context. Any assignment that asks you to read or write rhetorically will be easier and more enjoyable if you keep the rhetorical situation in mind. So for everything that you do, you always want to consider that rhetorical situation. Either I will present the rhetorical situation to you, or I will ask that you create one. Now here's a diagram of what the rhetorical situation looks like. You see that there's a message, a communicator, and an audience. In the message, that's where we house our logic. Because without sound logic, everything else falls apart. You must have a solid logical assertion. The message begins with your thesis. You must have a solid, explicit thesis that will help to convey your overall message. And you see at the top it has the reasons, the evidence, the data, the structure. All that plays a part into logos. Again, induction and deduction all work within logic. Then you have the communicator, which is where you house your ethos, the credibility, but also the connectedness, which is the morals as a part of that whole entire situation. So when you look at these images, whenever you look at any type of argument, you want to consider who is presenting this information. How does that influence the audience? And again, ethos is not just the credibility, the character of the communicator, but also how the author attempts to influence his or her targeted audience. Now, audience is the third part of this, and it's a very important part. Oftentimes, students ignore the audience. The audience helps to determine how you convey your message and how you appeal to their morals. So whenever you write, whenever you look at an image, whenever you look at a commercial or anything, you always want to consider who the communicator may be targeting. And this is where we house our pathos. Because we are human beings, we want to connect emotionally to the issue, and that's where pathos fits into it. It should not be a huge part of any type of argument, but it should be there, the human connection. And again, we have our beliefs, our values, knowledge, and experience. Ethos and pathos, they work together. because sometimes our mores are so ingrained. It is the foundation of what we do, how we do it, our work ethic, our relationships with another person, our belief in a higher being is all a part of that ethos. And when someone provokes it, they tend to create an emotional response. So these pieces, ethos, pathos, and logos within the rhetorical situation, they're not always separate. Sometimes they work and blend in together. And that is something you want to consider whenever you write. Consider how they work and mesh together. And also, when you start considering your image, either you're going to do a political cartoon, an advertisement, a video, a movie monologue, whatever you decide, you want to consider these concepts: subject, people, objects, actions, context, setting, background, focus, lighting, color. But there are also more that are not listed, such as alignment. Again, the persuasive appeals, kairos, those are all important concepts. Your paper will not cover all of these pieces, but you do want to hone in on 3 or 4 of them. So as you start to build your paper, you have something to work with. Now, your paper will be structured similar to this. This visual analysis, your introduction will tell who the artist is, identify the source, and publishing date. Your thesis should answer the question, what is the central purpose of the image? But in order to answer that question, you have to go back to those concepts we previously mentioned. Again, beginning with the rhetorical situation and then looking at the many elements of a visual image and exploring it and understanding how it all works. But again, start with the rhetorical situation, identify who the author is, where the image comes from, who could be the targeted audience, and then from there determine what is it that the author is trying to say. And then from that, your body paragraphs will explain how those pieces work together to create that image. It seems simple, but it is a daunting task. You do not want to wait until the last minute to build this paper. You want to take it a little bit at a time. Again, beginning with the context, the author, where it was published, who published it, when was it published, who could be the targeted audience. And then look at all those other little pieces, as I had mentioned: the subject, the objects, the setting, the focus, the alignment, the texture, all those pieces, and understand how those pieces work within that larger image. And then come to understanding what is the central purpose. And then your conclusion will explicate the importance of that piece, meaning that is the piece successful? Why is it successful? Is it art, or those kind of things. You want to really come to the evaluation part of your conclusion, but it should be significant to your targeted audience. So for this assignment, you're going to have to consider 2 pieces to this assignment. You're going to have to look at and critically analyze and interpret the visual, the rhetorical concept, the rhetorical situation within that image. And then you're going to have to translate that into your words to convey how you see it. Okay, so there's 2 layers to this assignment, and you want to take your time and pick something that you feel passionate about, not just anything, but something that you can spend time developing. This is the end of this presentation. More details are to come. You can feel free to email me any questions that you may have about this assignment, and I will see you again.